Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Dave Govett, composer of Wing Commander and Master of Orion, among a lot of other great game scores. And so thanks a lot for joining us.
Oh, glad to.
All right, this is the first Legends interview that's going to be conducted with video. So everybody forgive if there's some issues going on there. But yeah, this should be a lot of fun. What a lot of people might not know is that way back in the day was a group called Team Fat, led by George Alistair Sanger, and two other cohorts of his were Dave Govett here and Kevin Phelan, but also Joe McDermott. And so, yeah, what we're here to discuss is part of what you did helped define what advanced game soundtracks forward in the 90s. And so therefore, let's go a little bit further back than that. Like, what originally got you interested in computer music, and how did it all start?
It was very interesting. Well, for starters, I was just trying to scratch a living just doing music stuff in general. You know, wasn't particularly looking for game audio. I would just take whatever I could get at the time, you know. And right down the street was George Sanger down there on Shoal Creek. And I was working with a little broke, starving musician artist and everything. And occasionally we'd consult with him and talk about stuff, you know. So I got to know him, you know, just as in normal music context, you know. And then somehow, you know, he was starting to need some help, and he gave me a shot. And I was a broke musician at the time with my 76 Delta 88 car with the doors falling off, basically, you know. And he was joking. It's like he saw me driving in this little piece of crap car, and it's like, oh God. And it worked out good.
Yeah. Okay, well, so what led you to George? Like, did he put an ad out for, like, hey, I'd like to...
He was one of the small studios in town at the time, back when we didn't have the technology like we have now. And so I was looking for places occasionally to maybe take some of these artists and work. And I think we may have done a little something with him years before. So I just always stayed in touch. He was just really helpful.
Cool.
Just a really good guy.
Nice. So what was the first project that both of you worked on?
First project was Total Recall for Nintendo.
NES.
NES,
oh,
yeah.
My
the old
God.
Total Recall. And that was back when it's like he said, okay, so you've got 3 monophonic melodic instruments and a one-armed drummer with no legs. And that was basically the way they put it. And so we just used whatever MIDI, MT32s or whatever we had at the time, and just created something, and the programmers implemented it. Said, yeah, this will be a trumpet, this will be a bass, this will be that, whatever.
So you didn't have NES-based... Okay, yeah, you didn't have NES-based tools. You wrote in MIDI, and you said MT32 was one of the things you worked on?
Yeah, that was back in the day, was the kind of like the sound canvas at the time. You know, it was the predecessor to the sound canvas.
Right.
Whatnot. So, but just anything MIDI, and the technology I was using at the time was Dr. T's on a Atari ST, because it actually had MIDI inputs on it.
Oh, man, that's right. Yeah, I think that was the first mainstream PC that had MIDI in the actual
MIDI built in,
PC. Yeah. Okay. Impressive. Wow. Okay, so Total Recall and so take us between Total Recall and Wing Commander.
Okay, well, between that, we also did the MANIAC Mansion. I think that was next there. And he had just finished Loom not too long since then.
That's right. Based on Tchaikovsky's, was it Firebird or was it Swan Lake?
Swan Lake, more likely, I think, yeah. So that was good. So I can't remember what else we did. We did 2 or 3 or 4 other things before that, you know. And then the Wing Commander came out, because it's right here in Austin, Richard Garriott and the whole bit. And so yeah, we started composing that.
Cool. Okay, so for Wing Commander, again, like so I'm going back to, this is all based on my perspective, and I'm sure there were plenty that were similar, but Ad-lib comes on the scene in '87.
Exactly.
And that was from Canada, of all places, right? But like, who knew that a Canadian music professor would see way to, you know, blow open the PC music market and make things go beyond PC speaker. And that's where I got to hear Wing Commander for the first time. But as far as I know, it wasn't just Ad-lib. It would be multiple platforms like MT32.
They would use that to, if anybody had one, they could do it at home, and they certainly used it at the game conference shows where they showed it off. Gotcha. They made it real cinematic and everything for the time. Yeah.
Cool. Now, as far as, one of the amazing things about Wing Commander is that it didn't just take an approach of, hey, I have so many voices to use, I'm going to make it sound like an NES score, except maybe a little cooler.
No,
It went full blown into we want this to sound like a movie score, right?
As much as we could. And it was kind of limited to what the MT32 was, which was 8 MIDI channels and percussion.
Gotcha.
Which was on channel 10 at the time.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Channel 10. Channel 1 through 9, 1 through 8, or 1 through 9 maybe, and channel 10, something like that. And then their implementers, like Miles was the guy that did some of the implementation too.
John Miles.
Because
he was working at Origin at the time, isn't that right? Okay.
So he would take our stuff and try to make it as good as possible on the ad lib at the time.
Okay.
You know, it's rinky dink compared to what we have today, but it was, you know. But then when they showed it off at the trade shows, they showed it off with the MT32, and it just drew crowds. It was the first time they got to hear cinematic music on a game, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a thing.
Right. It was something that people could draw a line between something like Star Wars into a video game. And how did, in terms of creatively, was it the whole team, you, Dave, and whoever else?
It was mostly me and George at that time.
I'm sorry, George, yeah.
Yeah, it was mainly me and George. The other guys were working, may not have been part of the thing, or they were working on other things. I can't remember. So, yeah, it was, the two of us kind of did the bulk of the work there.
Okay. Did you ever get to chat with Chris Roberts about feedback on the music? Because I know he was like the sort of the mastermind behind the story.
No, they just seemed happy with it, you know. So I basically interacted with George mostly.
So that was back in the day when you could just sort of, as long as you wrote something that you were like, I really think this fits with what I'm being told, or at least, were you seeing screenshots at all of what was going on?
Occasionally, I think,
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We just knew that it was an epic Star Wars-like cinematic space game, so it's like, cool.
Okay.
And the theme is, I pulled it from a variety of sources. Pictures at an Exhibition is a big influence. So remember the theme to Wing Commander, dun 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 dun. Picture Exhibition, dun 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 dun. And a little bit of Star Trek Next Generation, dun 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 dun. So those kind of combined.
Oh man!
To make that theme a little bit. And then there's the soft theme, dun, 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 Back to the Future.
Oh, yes!
Dun, 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 dun.
See, it's just these things that are like coming up as like, you know.
Those were inspirations,
It's not as though I'd heard it someplace, but when you draw that.
It just shows that how we can borrow things a little bit. Everybody's borrowing. Look at John Williams, host the planets.
Yeah.
That's the Star Wars thing. The key is just to make it your own, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I'd say Pictures and Exhibition and Back to the Future were two of the big inspirations for that. And then the rhythmic concept of Star Trek Next Generation.
Right. Okay. So while you're playing, you have, you know, there was also an element of interactivity when you get, you know, you've got the cinematic start when it dun 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 when you run into your cockpit, and then when you're actually in whatever, you know, fighter that you've been lucky enough to be able to use, there's the sort of more subdued, I'm just flying around, I haven't encountered any Kilrathi yet, and then when you actually start into combat, like it transitions. So how did that?
It wasn't interactive. They were just telling us, this is what we need. We need a theme. We need some combat music. We need some of this flying around music. We need some in the lounge. And so we just write like 1 or 2 minutes worth of stuff that they could kind of loop. And then the programmers implemented the changes as smoothly as they could at the time.
Gotcha.
So we didn't have access to the game. It wasn't like what you're doing today, you know, with WYs and being able to actually play the game. It was much more primitive.
So you got to hear your stuff in the game when the game came out, right? Or was it before that?
Maybe a little before. Yeah, we got to see some footage and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you was there, I mean, so George was probably the person that would do the visiting to Origin, and you know, y'all would be, you know, were you at the Greenlawn studio at Flabby Road at this point, or was it?
No. I was at my little apartment in North Austin. George was at his house there on Shoal Creek.
Gotcha.
And that was headquarters for a while, the Shoal Creek location.
Okay.
So that was kind of like, you know, ground zero for a lot of Team Fat stuff for years.
Oh, wow.
You know, and
Okay.
before Greenlawn, we were in a place in Leander for a while. We did a lot of
Really?
stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So an office space, or how did
It
that
was a
work?
house, believe it or
Really?
not, and we each had our own
Okay.
little rooms, and we were there for years, for a while.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah,
I had
now
no
it's like
idea.
athletic HQ for Leander School District, and whatnot.
Oh man, that's
So, and
that's
then the
incredible.
Greenlawn thing after that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you had your own rooms in
Mm-hmm.
Greenlawn,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and you had the big space that you could do Foley or record
Mm-hmm.
live or
Yeah,
however that worked.
exactly. Big
Okay.
messy place, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. So yes, so the legend began, and moving on from that, you worked on Wing Commander 2 as well. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got
Okay.
some of the music there, along with their in-house composers. They offered us all in-house gigs, you know, but the pay just wasn't all that hot, and it was, you know, could have been cool. You know, George Olsey wound up eventually taking that slot at some point, and that really set him out.
I think he worked on 3, or did he do
Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
3 on basically. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so what I mean was 2 basically just a repeat of the first one. You knew the formula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did
Okay.
it the very same way, and then Dana Glover and another guy, I can't remember his name, were working there at the time, and they helped implement it, and they wrote a few themes too, you know. So yeah, it's kind of a collaborative thing. Yeah.
How about Mark Shafkin and Randy Buck? Did you work with either of them?
Time or two, yeah, they came to some Team Fat lunches and things like that. Yeah, auditioned to try and do some games with Mark Shafkin. He was kind of in the head of some things. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I remember trying to get music from Crusader because it was mods, and Jason Eli was just another team at Origin, and so he was running his own thing, and we did some mod files,
Mm-hmm.
and I did an Ultima version of using a mod, and we pitched like mods for like all of the Origin soundtracks, but what came back, and I think maybe it was just Shafkin, or maybe it was I don't know who,
Mm-hmm.
was like we use general MIDI, or we use we do our stuff
Mm-hmm.
through MIDI and we play our stuff in. This mod stuff is like really a little difficult to try to figure out, and
Mm-hmm.
it would mean a big learning curve and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what came back. But
Mm-hmm.
I get it now. At the time I was like, oh, but it sounds so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. No, it's nice now. Everything's like full cinematic with surround in some places.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely a wide open field now.
We have everything we wanted, and we're so paralyzed by choice, right?
Mm-hmm. Paralyzed by choice, and now it's like if you want to do the gigs, it's like you've got to be a part-time programmer now.
Just about.
Just
It's pretty
yeah.
insane. All right. So let's see. So after Wing Commander 2, take us through
Some of the
the end
games
of Origin to the beginning of Nemesys.
Yeah, so and we just did a variety of games. We did a lot of the Electronic Arts, the Navy Fighters and Navy SEALs series, and a whole bunch of those games, little combat games. I think we did Mahjong, that I can remember. Then we collaborated a little bit. It's mostly George and Joe a little bit, but I helped out a little bit on the 7th Guest, 11th Hour stuff. That was a neat relationship with those creators. They were really cool folks.
That was the first actual recorded studio tracks that made it
Mhm.
into a CD.
Made it into the cutscenes at least, and
Right.
the theme. And then the gameplay was still MIDI based at the time.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. So made it through that.
Those were huge hits.
Yep. And just kept working at it for a while. And eventually once things opened in digital audio, then they started seeking a lot of Hollywood composers for a while, even if they weren't all that great.
Gotcha.
And now there's good composers working on all these games. And we kind of got frozen out at that point a little bit, And so as things slowed down on our end, that's when I hooked up with the Nemesys folks.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Before we get to Nemesys, it's something that I've noticed is that like a lot of the fans of these original games will like, whether it's you, me, or George or whoever, they'll be like, "But you're a legend. You did this great stuff. Why wouldn't they hire you on new things and keep things going?"
Mm-hmm.
And part of Legends that, or this interview series that I've intended is, I talked to Robert Allen or Bobby Prince. It's like, maybe we should all just sort of ask the question, like, why exactly is that? Is it because the budgets got bigger and they thought, okay, we have money, therefore we can hire Hans Zimmer?
Exactly, yeah. Or just somebody that lives in LA at the time.
Right.
There was some mystique of real composers.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, so it was pretty brutal. Yeah, everything just dried up for a while, and
I'm with you on that.
yeah, exactly. And
okay,
it's kind of come back full circle, but
Yeah.
for a while there was just a complete downturn where it's like, no, we're going with these other folks,
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you discover that like not all people that are involved in films really have a temperament for games, and they don't really get like, okay, well, obviously the player's going to influence some of this, so how are we going to make it work?
Yeah, during the transition. Now they're getting it. Now it's much better now. Yeah.
That's good to know. And you hear that? All, American composers, even folks in Japan that think they might not have gigs, well, the opportunities are a little more open. Hopefully. You still got to hustle, of course, but okay, cool. So yes, how did Nemesys start?
Well, Nemesys was the eternal quest, as I'm sure you realize, to get better realistic orchestra. It was all samples, and it was very expensive. I mean, 64 megabytes of RAM was $1,200 on one $2,500 keyboard, like Kurzweil or Akai's. And Hans Zimmer at the time had like a whole room full of Akai's, like 40 or 50 of them, just to hold a fraction of what we have access to today, because it all had to fit into physical RAM, physical hardware. And it's like I was just looking for a better solution, and I hear about this Gigasampler. And lo and behold, they're here in Austin at the time,
Okay, so they started here.
They are, the people, they still live here, moving on to other things. And it's like, oh, okay, I got to go visit these folks. And I just started hanging out with them and helping them with some demos, helping them learning to map some instruments out, because this was where they could stream the samples off the hard drive. They would put the attack in RAM, whatever you had, like 2 gigabytes on the computer at the time, and everything else would stream off the hard drive. And it's like, okay, to put it in perspective, I had the Miroslav Vitas Orchestra Library at the time, spent $3,500 for this beast, and could only use a fraction at a time and have to offload it to audio tracks and then reload some more. And it took forever. And it was about a gigabyte worth on 4 CDs, 4 Akai CDs.
Yeah.
And I was like, going to have to get a loan or something if I wanted to play this whole library, which is primitive by today's standards, but it was great. It would have cost at least $50,000 worth of rack mount samplers to have that gigabyte of RAM, 128 megabytes in each. And I hear about this, and they got a 1 gigabyte piano streaming, and it's like, okay, that's a game changer.
I remember the first time I tried to load that, and it kind of made my PC not die, but it had some. It took a while.
Yeah, it
was a little slow.
A little more power.
Right.
Yeah. But still, it was amazing to be able to play this beautiful piano, just like that. And the smaller orchestra instruments were effortless for it.
Nice.
So yeah, I just kind of got embedded with them, and eventually they were shy about asking if I wanted to work for them because they knew I worked Team Fat, and I was like, no, that stuff's kind of bottomed out a little bit. I'll take the job, and so I got a full-time salary job for several years there.
Awesome.
And it was a good deal because I got to do all the NAMM shows and meet all the celebrities. I got to go build up relationship with Hans Zimmer, Marc Isham, and
so they hopped right on board with that.
Oh, big time! We installed Hans Zimmer's first big system too.
Oh man, that's amazing.
And there's, if you do an internship with him, you're going to be living in LA and working for free. And he offered me to come be his assistant for a while. It's like, that was kind of cool.
That is.
Yeah.
I mean, look how big he is now. Working.
Oh, maybe I should have taken it. I don't know,
wow.
But I was just going to be unmanageable, to pull that off, to relocate and scratch a living for about a year, working as an intern basically.
Gotcha.
But he can get you plugged in, no doubt about it. But it was an honor to hang out there and do all that stuff.
That's cool. Okay. So, I mean, and that was the thing I always wondered, because at Midway, I had 3 PCs set up with Giga Studio, and they had been, there was one that was already set up, and then the plan was to just have a PC dependent on how many parts and what kind of detail you wanted. So there was supposed to be just woodwinds for one and horns for another, and
another,
and they all were through. They were networked. I thought it was Ethernet at the time, but maybe it was something else. Well, there was Ethernet that was the MIDI, and then they were playing direct. They were playing audio directly, so they each had an audio connection that would go into a mixer. So
this is before Vienna Ensemble Pro,
and each one had to be connected using a standard 5-pin MIDI I/O into one of the rack mount Motu interfaces. So that was awesome. I got to write some amazing things, and then all of a sudden it seemed, Tascam bought Nemesys, right? So
eventually,
take us through that.
Yeah. So at this point, I'd gone back to contracting, And then Tascam did buy them out. I got a little bit of small windfall out of that as being having stock options at Nemesys and all that
Nice.
stuff. Yeah. So, but while at Nemesys, yeah, I got to tour the world doing all the Guitar Center tours, evangelizing it, all paid expense trips all through Europe and United States. It was really cool. And hanging out in studios with various composers, it was really cool. So I got to actually got to have a brush with some celebrities.
Had any of them heard of the stuff you'd done, like Wing Commander?
They were some were a little familiar with it. Yeah. So, but yeah, they were cool folks though, little composers. Yeah. So that was a neat experience there.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. And then, but at some point, like I kept wondering, I was just like, well, now I'm not using Gigasampler anymore. I got to use Contact.
Everything kind of moved to Contact. Contact came in and they didn't defend their patents very well of the streaming sampler concept, So it's like, okay, well, they're not going to defend the patents.
So they got pushed out of the market just from bigger fish.
That bigger fish, and it took them too long to come up with a Mac version. Everybody really needed a Mac version. That was the Achilles heel for Nemesys.
Gotcha.
There's no Mac version, And the copy protection was a little kludgy in the day, and that kind of drove some people up the wall too. So there's a few things like that just didn't move fast enough.
There's been some great Austin companies, whether it's Nemesys or was it Oasis, the company that made, or I don't know if I'm thinking of the right name. They made an all-in-one keyboard. Is that what the name of the company was?
Yeah, George had one of those. Yeah.
And you would touch screen and all that, and I was thinking these are great ideas for just pushing but they all seem to fizzle out for some reason.
Yeah. Now, a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
But maybe not always long-term success.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay, so great success with Nemesys. That they get pushed out of the market, and at that point, musically, where are you at this point?
Right now, well, my full-time gig right now, I'd always wanted to be a police officer, and I was just stressed out trying to scratch a living. And I noticed back when I was touring with Silver Thistle pipes and drums and I was training the police at APD for their band. And we were touring, doing some competition. I noticed these guys are not as stressed out as I am. And I better do it before I get too old and fat to do it, So I put myself through the College Police Academy. And eventually I wound up with a long-term career at Austin Community College with their police department. So
nice.
So that's my day job. And I've been, getting back into the music, doing it more for fun now, for the most part. So I don't have to make the living right now, but I am working towards some retirement work, audio engineering and whatever else is needed. So, yeah.
Another aspect of this, again, is that, the name Legend isn't just for ego. It's because fans say, but you're a legend. And that's like, I don't see, modern game scores. Another aspect of this is talking to some colleagues of ours like Stefan Schutz and others out there. The question then becomes, hey, well, we've written all these game scores. And yet, there's no residuals, and it's understandable in one way. It's like, hey, we did a job. We got paid for the job. It's fine.
It was all work for hire.
And exactly. At the same time, like, you keep doing it, and I'm thinking, well, I can't imagine a time when I wouldn't want to do that. But does that mean that at a certain point in your life, you start thinking, it would be nice not to have to slog and just...
That's what happened, right. Just the slog. And the thing is doing everything but music for the most part. Just scratching out, doing things, designing some virtual instruments for East West, Remember the Quantum Leap Symphony Orchestra? I helped
I still use it.
Yeah, I mapped some of that out with Nick Phoenix. And I worked on their propaganda, their videos stuff, and got to interview Keith O. Johnson, the recording. He's the recording engineer that recorded it. He's with Reference Records. I'll play you some of his stuff here in a little bit.
Okay.
He's the best live orchestra recording engineer. And so he mentored me a little bit, got to learn some of his trade secrets a little bit, which is kind of cool.
That's great.
So so I did a lot of work for the virtual instrument folks, in the time.
So not just Nemesys then. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So,
all right. But like you said,
Nemesys got me plugged into that group for there. So we worked with Doug Rogers at East West. Now they got the East West Studios scoring stage, and they're doing some good stuff. Just amazing stuff they're doing.
There's there's the cloud thing, which I haven't jumped onto. I went Spitfire.
We don't need it because we can do Spitfire, and me, I'm also doing I love Spitfire, but I'm finding just the simplicity in what is it called, cinematic scoring screens from Australia, cinematic scoring tools and everything.
Right.
They're really good, but Spitfire is just amazing. Yeah. But for somebody that's struggling, that cloud's the way to go. $25 a month, you have access to all the virtual instruments you need. Another $25 a month, you can do the BrainWorks plug-in mega bundle and buy a DAW or get Reaper, use it free, pay for it when you can afford it.
Right.
There's no excuse. The tools are available. So $50 a month plus, Reaper, you're set.
Okay. Well, cool. So, but yeah, like as you said, you've got a solution as an alternate career from music in order to get you steady income, because music certainly isn't a guarantee. Definitely the creative aspect of it, the technological aspect, and the salesperson aspect of it might have a little more opportunities, but there can also be extenuate, crazy hours, crazy travel.
Yeah, I work a lot less hard for more money now.
Gotcha.
Which is in an industry where, ideally it can be very noble. You can make a difference in someone's life. You can save a life. So it's a nice thing. And the campus policing is so nice because you're not out there just messing with people. If we make an arrest, you have to come to us and do something really stupid. You have to work hard for us to arrest you. You got to be a real idiot.
Gotcha.
For ACC to be taking you to jail, you really screwed up, and you came to our house and caused trouble. We didn't pick you off the street. No excuse.
Okay, so I mean that in that way, there's a lot less of these moral choices that plenty of fellow officers are going through when they're the ones that are walking around, and
they're on the street, and it's a almost a no-win situation sometimes. Yeah, it's really tricky.
Yeah.
So they're having to adjust.
Man,
we were shielded from the worst of it.
And when you say worst of it, what do you mean?
COVID, we wound up not exposed to a lot of people. They closed a lot of the campuses. We babysit empty buildings for a while.
Oh, okay.
Even got a month off just to stay home, stay away from everything.
Good.
So, and then when the riots hit because of the poor George Floyd thing, we were shielded from a lot of that just because we were pretty popular as campus police. We developed a lot and we're not on the street, just in the thick of it as much.
Gotcha. So the
we were
backlash,
from,
the whole defund the police thing, that's part of what you're talking about.
Yeah, we had job security. There was no talk of defunding in our area. And we were not just on the street as heavy as the poor guys, out there, like with APD and stuff. So we were shielded from the worst of it. It was not a bad place to be working at the time.
Great. Cool. So the latest game you worked on is the Kickstarter updated, is it remastered Master of Orion, or was it a full-on sequel?
Okay, there's two things that I got to work on. Remember Ultima Underworld? They did a Kickstarter reboot of that.
Yes.
And I got paid to write kind of their opening and closing themes. They didn't really have music. They had more effects and ambience in the game. And that was cool, so I kind of rebooted some of the music a little bit. Cool. And that turned out real good. And before that, it was the Master of Orion reboot. And that included like half the Star Wars and Star Trek Next Generation cast. Worf, was Michael Dorn.
That's right, yes.
He was the narrator. And that was the first time I got to really hear my music with a celebrity voice like that. That was impressive.
Awesome.
And it was the wargaming folks did it. They had a budget. They just paid me monthly to work on it for a year and a half. So I doubled my salary for a year and a half, which is cool.
That's awesome.
It turned out to be right at spec, right at 1,000 a minute when it was all said and done.
Right.
So that was not too bad. And that was cool. Yeah.
Very awesome. Okay, so what was the response like to Master of Orion?
The response to the music was pretty good, and all that. The game itself, the hardcore gamers, I don't know if they were as impressed with it, but they liked it. It was very good graphics and just a neat reboot to see a lot of good celebrities involved. Gotcha. So I don't know. I'm not sure how it went. It didn't just take off like a Bat Out of Hell or anything like that, but it was respectable.
Okay.
It did good. I don't think it did as well as they were expecting, so there was not a further sequel at that point.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Right on. Okay. So one of the things that I think a lot of fans of your work probably don't know or may not know is that you're very tech-minded as far as like problem solving goes, whether it's with your work with Austin Community College or whether it's your work in music. You do have a video out there on control surfaces right now, but some of the stuff that you were showing me was pretty amazing in terms of just how you would be able to freeze tracks and use Cubase's tools in order to really now. Some of the stuff that we're going to go over we'll probably end up capturing, and then I'll just do like a voiceover or whatever where you can describe it as opposed to holding the camera over your shoulder or anything
Mhm.
like that. But if you can think of a few things, and I know you can, that you've come up with lately as far as problem solving with music writing.
Okay. Well, the first story that's really interesting goes back to the Nemesys days. Remember, we were talking about Miroslav Vitos. I was a big fan of his library. And he came, and of course, obviously, we were going to port his stuff. And he came out and spent a week with us. So I got to hang with him for a week and get my CDs autographed and everything. And it's like he was just cool as can be.
Cool.
Famous bassist for Weather Report, but he really pioneered,
I was going to say that before Vienna, that was the thing.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
And to work with him, and we ported everything to the Gigasampler side by side, together, and that was really an honor. And here's what's interesting. People don't know this, but this is probably my biggest claim to fame, is one thing he did that nobody else did is he just kept the ranges of his instruments and left the other notes blank, up and below. It was only the instrument range. Other people would stretch that top and bottom note and fill up the whole keyboard.
Right.
And he didn't want people using it wrong and having this stretched out stuff.
Right.
And we were thinking, okay, how can we, right now we're just putting everything on multiple MIDI channels. Long note, short note, détaché, this, that, and the other. And it's like articulation switching was not invented yet at this point. And so we're there together, and it's like, we got this thing called a dimension switch, which is like an articulation switch. We could put it on a mod wheel, we could put it on whatever, and it's like, well, wait a minute, we got all these unused notes at the bottom of the damn keyboard, And it's like, I wish we had something like the Ensoniq patch select button. And so we go, it's like, hey, guy, we talked to the programmer of the editor. It's like, is there any way to make a dimension switch based on keys? He said, yeah, sure. Either white keys, black, or chromatic. It's like, sure. 5 minutes later, he hands us a floppy disk, and we were the first users and inventors of the key switch.
You made key switch.
We invented it.
Oh my God, that's amazing! With like so many patch names, it says
somebody would have figured it out eventually, but
right.
But we were the first to bring it to the market. Yeah,
that's incredible.
The key switch. Yeah.
Oh man,
we were the world's first users of the key switch, and it was inspired by his not using up all the keys.
The next time I fire up one of the Quantum Leap patches and it says key switch on it, that's what I'll be thinking of. That's
exactly. Yeah, that's where it came from. Somebody would have figured out eventually.
Yeah.
Hammond B3s do a little bit of that to switch their different EQs and things like that, draw bars. And Ensoniq EPS inspired a little bit. Remember the patch select button? It was a little sampler.
I never used an Ensoniq.
It was a simple old school sampler.
Yeah.
And they had 2 buttons. And so you would have your main articulation, then you could press one button, get a second one, another button, get another one, and both buttons. So you could have 4 articulations.
Okay.
But we just took that to a whole new level with the key switch.
You have as many as you have open keys.
Yeah, now it's like this thing that just annoys people. It's old school technology.
Well, it depends, right? Because if you're doing live play, or at least you want more articulation based on play style, you got your Seaboard Rolly Labs that you could do all kinds of stuff with, like vibrato in real time. But at the same time, if I do a quick on-off and I want that to be a staccato, when people started doing that, I was like, I like it.
And so I can, for the video, I can give you my recommendation. People wonder about, they'll do these crazy key switches which has all the articulations. Like, no, you don't need that. You only need key switches on things that you need instant access to. So for instance, you really don't need harmonics on a key switch. A real violinist is not going to go from to harmonics.
Right, exactly.
So harmonics and some of the solpanicello, some of these things, they go on their own thing. And so you're going to need it for your short, medium, long notes, maybe switch to trills, things like that.
Gotcha.
So you don't need as many as you think.
Gotcha.
And so the other articulations, put them on their own MIDI channel.
Huh, okay.
You only need it for something that you need instant switching to. So keep that in mind. There's no reason to have 2 octaves of key switches for everything the instrument can do. That's just not right.
Did you ever work with Nenad Varignik?
That name's not familiar.
He worked on Privateer with Marc Shapkin.
Oh, okay.
That would have been not too long after Wing Commander 2 or whatever it was, but he was a huge fan of Vienna, and he was a complete nerd about key switching and customization of patches. And
they pioneered. They invented the legato transition for sampling.
You mean like portamento?
It's not portamento, but it's the portamento style playing that did they recorded all the legato to give you that, and that's just kind of. But they're the ones that created that.
Okay.
That started that revolution.
Dang. All right. So how about DAWs? I know that we had talked about going from Cubase to Reaper back to Cubase.
Yeah. So right now, Cubase is the main thing I'm using right now. I've been using it for years. So we'll start at the beginning. I started with Dr. T's on the Atari.
Uh-huh.
And then on the Atari, I eventually moved over to what was called eMagic Logic or eMagic.
Oh my gosh.
That was the predecessor to Logic.
Yep.
So I was on that for a while. And then I did Logic on a PC and maybe even a Mac. And eventually one thing went Mac only. That's when I went over to Cubase. Just I didn't want to be hemmed into the Mac, you know. And I've been on them ever since. But definitely had a little dalliance with Reaper, and I can definitely recommend it. Especially if somebody's just getting started. You can use it free until you can afford to buy a license for like $80, really cheap, you know. But they don't ask you for anything. They just, you know, you can use it free, but you know, at some point you're going to feel guilty and you're going to pay for the license because it's cheap.
Yeah,
and they do great work.
Isn't like, you know, the most expensive, like, you know, hey, for using it constantly for professional purposes, it's like $300 or
something like that. Yeah. But most people are only going to need to pay the $80 or so.
Right.
And it is powerful. It is much more efficient than Cubase and everything. It just boots up, it installs, and it boots up quick. It is in many ways superior to all the other DAWs in my opinion. But the workflow, I just like the Cubase workflow generally.
Yeah.
I'll show you some stuff here in a little
And
bit.
it's kind of like it's also, I'm sure, like, you know, there's people that get used to Pro Tools, and to be fair, when I see how they're using it, I'm like, that makes sense. Yeah. When I actually tried to use Pro Tools, because for one project I had to, I was like, I'm just gonna stick to Nuendo.
Oh yeah.
So.
And Cubase and Nuendo, same basic concept. They do very similar things. So yeah, it's just the workflow is just so much quicker for me. You know, but it's very inefficient. I want to gripe about that. It takes a while to boot up, and it's just not as stable as Reaper. So I definitely give a lot of props to Reaper. Those guys are amazing.
Cool.
So, but I started checking out them. I was checking out Studio One and even Cakewalk, and I like these workflows. And eventually, Cubase got around to implementing some of those, and it's like, okay, that's a game changer. So I'm back mainly using Cubase.
Okay.
You know, and programming stuff on some of these buttons here.
Well, I was gonna say, show me a little bit of that.
Okay, cool. Let's see. We'll pull that up a little later. So I'm using the Stream Deck, and it can just launch things. So I can just launch various things, and I got the Cubase buttons in here. This is a product. It's real kludgy to install it, but once you install it, it's really nice to be able to have one button access to some things.
Yeah, and you can assign whatever you want in Cubase to the buttons on Stream Deck.
You can, but this is a pre-done thing, and I just don't mess with it.
I get it. Okay.
I just kind of stick with it. Yeah. So let me pull up. So yeah, some of the stuff that I kind of programmed into Cubase, like here, I'm working on. You know, you can either use the control surface or this thing here. And so I've got it set up to where I can move to the different markers, different parts of the song.
Nice.
And do all that stuff there and stop it and all that good stuff. And then when I'm mixing, this is going to be handy. I haven't done this for orchestra, but now I'm going to start doing it. But you can get... So I've got 4 buttons programmed to the monitor, so we can monitor, listen to the medium speakers.
Man, that's great.
Listen to those, and then number 4, headphones. So I got 4 things to listen to.
Okay.
And then I've got one set up to go mono and stereo. So yeah, so if I want to check my mono and stereo. Go mono, back to stereo.
Nice.
And then I've got the third one, just brings up the mixer, so I don't have to always have it on a separate screen. Gotcha. And then these 8 were already pre-programmed in the spec on Mackie Control to do different configurations of the mixer. You can have more than 8, but there's only 8 buttons, so I've just kind of homed it in there. So I press this and I've got my whole drum mix, all the drum mix, and I can sit there and tweak them like that. Number 2 number 1 is everything all together, the whole thing. And as you bank and touch a fader, it'll automatically do that.
Go straight to
go like that. But if I go to that wrong one. Number 2, it's just drums only. So I just have my whole drum mix.
So but you still color code specific instrument groups, like
I sure
purple
do.
is drums?
And I love icons. Got to have icons.
Gotcha.
So I can see that's a kick. I don't even have to read the things. I can see what everything is there.
Okay.
You got a little hi-hat and all that good stuff. I'll just go through. 3 is the bass. So I got room for a bass amp, or a bass sub, you know, a bass group, and all the plugins. Got all the potential guitars.
And this is all on one monitor. So
All on one monitor,
go to track view
Mm-hmm.
and you want to start writing something,
I just
you just
flick a button.
flick it over to track
Yeah,
view. Okay,
and these
gotcha.
buttons still do the thing there. So I'm going to start doing that for orchestration. I'll have strings, you know, violins, violas, and so on. I'm just going to figure out what I want to use the 8 buttons for. And it's brutal. This is why I could have made this work in Reaper, but I just didn't know how. It's just, I'd rather just get to work.
Okay.
But
how about if you want to see, like, let's say for sake of argument, if you've got like a MIDI track and you want to take a look at the MIDI notes, do you select?
You just double click on it. It shows up in Cubase.
Okay, so you got half and half there. Because I've been curious, like, because sometimes if I'm navigating in that half size screen and I want to be able to see the range of MIDI notes that I need to be able to manipulate, it can be a little kludgy that way.
You can.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you can always go for a full screen if you want. You know?
Gotcha.
And you can drag that a little bit. This is just convenient, but you can, get a full screen and put it on a whole nother screen if you want. You know, so if I need that, I can do that. You know, just open it up. Under your workspaces or your windows or whatever. MIDI, Remote Manager, VST Plugin Manager. Anyway, I can't remember where it's at, but
that's fine.
I'm just not needing it right now.
Right.
So
yeah, this is all audio. So.
Yeah, but even for MIDI, the MIDI just shows up when you double click on the track down here.
Right.
And if you do several things, see, I'm seeing several audio tracks. Well, that works with MIDI. So whatever you select just shows up there. So yeah, it's just very handy.
Nice.
And it just gives me all the automation and everything.
And it's Behringer, so you can't say Behringer is all bad, right?
I got no problems with them. I think they're awesome. Yeah,
that's cool. Right.
So yeah, the other thing, I got the UC1. So if you want to do old console style mixing, it's brilliant just because it launches all of their channel strip plugins and bus compressors. So if I get let's see here, if I go to kind of the master. So you got their little bus compressor, which I'm going to pull up. SSL, and it's neat, but everything on the screen actually the buttons on this thing,
Gotcha.
So you can just do all that kind of stuff and have it in and out. Really messing it up.
Kind of like Sony's desks, like they have their Oxford plugins that are modeled on their actual digital console.
No, they're great, but what they're doing is really neat. And if you get that and you get one of their little analog summing mixer, which they've obsoleted it, they'll probably come up with something new.
The 6? Yeah.
Yeah, the Sigma thing.
Oh, the Sigma, okay.
And you could have a poor man's solid state logic, controlling the plugins with their hardware, with their faders, because their faders will actually launch the individual plugins.
Right.
Right. You could have a poor man's solid state logic. That's not a bad deal.
Yeah.